For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
Well, welcome back to Dunkin' Donuts. Craig, this is the world's largest Dunkin' Donuts because now it stretches all the way from New Hampshire, all the way, and you can see in the far seat,
London.
On the other side of the room there in central London is live from these 2012 Olympic Games. I've always wanted to say that. Is Norbert. Norbert, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, enjoying my Krispy Kreme. Oh, sorry, Dunkin' Donut.
Now, what is your favorite donut? What donut are you enjoying over there right now?
I do like a good Krispy Kreme, just a plain Krispy Kreme.
With a little sign. Now, in London, do they have the little sign come on and saying donuts are hot? Come in and get a fresh one.
You know, I don't actually know where they make the darn things. I haven't seen it. I see the trucks delivering them everywhere.
That's not Krispy Kreme. That makes me a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. That's
not the same experience at all.
That's not right at all.
That doesn't mean anything because in London, as you all know, being such an old city, there's alleyway on alleyways and sideways. Everything is tucked in everywhere. You could be walking right by something and not realize it until you actually just make a certain turn one day and say, "Oh my God, this is right here in front of me all this time."
Wow,
it's crazy. Yeah.
So, all right. So we figured, well, Norbert, as those of you who've heard Norbert on the show before are familiar with his various antics when he was here in the States with the New Jersey SOBs. Norbert is obviously, you are a very dedicated miniature wargamer. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Indeed. And mostly, you spend most of your time in the War Machine Hordes, Privateer Press universe, but it doesn't mean you don't dabble or occasionally get lured away to the current fancy, right?
I know. I liken it to having a mistress. You really, really shouldn't be doing that. And it's nothing but trouble in the long run, but man, is it tempting.
Well, that's a good analogy. So we thought it'd be kind of fun to talk a little bit about what keeps us, because miniature war gamers, we're sort of a strange breed, right? We, board gamers have a lot of different board games, and they'll play different ones. And of course, there's some certain go-to board games you love to get out every once in a while, but you always try with miniature gamers, it's such a large element of hobby around it that we generally tend to stick to one, but then we'll always bounce around a little bit. And so that'd be kind of fun to talk about what keeps us with the same miniature war game for year after year. But at the same time, though, what does a new miniature war game have to sort of have in it to kind of make us go, wait, what? Is that worth looking at? That'd be kind of fun. So why don't we start with Craig? Craig?
Okay, yes.
So what keeps you excited in your current miniature war game? Like, let's say you've put your favorite game down for a little while, tried something, but what brings you back to it? What keeps you going and in that same miniature war game day after day?
Well, I would say I'm the kind of guy that needs the total package, so to speak. So I need models that really excite me, and I need story that really excites me, and I need rules that don't get in the way of my enjoyment. That's what I think I need. So in that order, I don't need the rules to be awesome. I mean, it always irks me when I really like a game and I go online and I find people are like, well, that's not true because if these 4 completely unrealistic things happen all at the same time, then the rule is broken. I don't really need it to get down to that level, but I need the rules to not get in my way of having fun. The way the stories and the models make it look like it should happen. That's what I want to. I want to step up to a gaming table where the terrain looks like it should in my head, and the models all look like they should in my head, and the game mechanics make it work basically the way the whole story should play out, the way it's been presented for the game. That's what I need. And that's what will keep bringing me back to a game, if all of those things fall in line.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good. So, Norbert, how about you in terms of the fundamentals? What kind of things do you keep you in your favorite miniature war game?
Well, okay, so as you guys alluded to, I play War Machine Hordes pretty much exclusively, and to me, the fiction is nice. I definitely enjoy reading the fiction, but I guess it doesn't light my me up too terribly much. It's I think the bedrock of my continued wanting to play it is the fact that the rule set is so tight. I don't have any real problems with the
We're
rules.
done with this guy. We're done with this guy. This is it. Forget
Preach it, Norbert. Preach it.
It's a tight rule set.
Yep.
You guys have it in your one of your bumpers there, and
Right.
it's so true for me. So because of that, I mean, that is kind of like a basal thing that I don't have to worry about, and so it doesn't frustrate me. Playing the game does not frustrate me because it's clear. So there's that. That's kind of underlying. But then what it is that Privateer Press does is that they continually to do tweaks to their overall system offering that keep it, just as you try to kind of get settled in, they put it off kilter just a little bit. So, we just got kind of used to something called battle engines, which were the first to use these like really large model bases.
Right.
And they had special rules that other models didn't really have. And so it was like, wow, how do these things work? And how do we get them integrated into the system? How does it help my army? And those things we kind of just had for maybe a year or so, and now they've introduced entirely new type of warjacks called Colossals and new war beasts called Gargantuans, which are not power pieces, which is the interesting thing. So it's not like, oh, I need this now to win because it's more power than anything else, but adds a whole level of complexity and different kind of abilities that makes you start wondering, well, gee, how could that, is this any good? How does it work? And start integrating it into the army as a result. So they always have some sort of not only new models coming out, but fundamentally different kind of tweaks to the game system itself.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Norbert. And I think that's one of the things that I think a lot of miniature war games do to keep us excited, which is the idea that there are these new elements to the game. Colossals and Battle Engines are a great example. GW just really came out with the flyer system native to the rule set. That's another good example. If you look at Malifaux with the avatars, all of a sudden kicking in, that was a really good example of all of a sudden it twists the game in a way. And what's also cool about them, all three of those examples, not only kick the game up with, wow, there's a whole other new piece and mechanics set to the game that's different, right? Like the way the avatars work and the flyers work and the colossals work, but also it's a new modeling challenge. If you look at the colossals, they're a whole new scale for War Machine. The flyers, there's been variations of those for a while, but the new plastic kits for the flyers from GW are fantastic. And the same is true of the avatars. Some of the avatars from Malifaux are some of the best, metal miniatures you'll ever see, and some of the really cool, fantastic sculpts. So it's really, it gets you in both places, right? It gets you in the modeling side, and it gets you in the game mechanics side. And so it kind of appeals to both sides, because every game's got some players who lean a little more towards the Craig side of, I like the story and the modeling first, and the rules, as long as they aren't overly confusing or broken, I'm happy. And then the people who are more like Norbert, who is, the fluff and models are great, but really if the rules are solid, that's where it is. And everybody, all gamers are somewhere in there, right? All of us are.
Sure.
And I think what's cool about these kind of things is they really bring both. All of us get excited about that, right? There's a new challenge for my how do I make the game as you play the game as efficiently as possible, and there's also a new challenge for my modeling skills, right? Which is cool. And new fluff to read also usually around all these new things.
Sure.
So that's one of the
key.
things.
That's why that really does it for all gamers, I think. Growing your game and expanding your offerings, as long as you do it in a way that makes sense, gives everybody something. So if you're like, I like the story, well, the story is probably going to be developing. Right. And I like the models, well, you're going to get new models. And Norbert likes the rules. Well, if the rules are tight, then he's, so that sort of expansion, and you can't stagnate. You've got to constantly be moving forward. And that too is what keeps people excited and focused.
That was going to be my next point. Is that I think the fact is that you need to me anyway, I need a living system, a healthy living system, and that means in terms of the game development, it's living and evolving, but it also means then that the community is healthy and involved. So I feel the most excited to be part of like a community, so that I know that there's lots of gamers playing this game. I have other people to play it with, to talk about it with. I can go to conventions, and there's lots of activities, tournaments and things to play in. So I feel like I'm part of like a thing a little bit bigger than myself, actually.
I think it's a really good point. The how much of the community exists is really important. And we'll touch on more of that in a minute. But the other thing I wanted to mention, we're talking about how the game expands and is alive and grows. So the one example we just gave is the idea that every faction gets something new. So no matter what faction you play, hey, we all got something. But what about when they when a game system introduces a whole new faction at once. So you see this a lot with younger games. Just happened with Dust Warfare right now, right? Boom, the SSU book just came out. But also it happens with more mainstream games. Privateer Press introduced Retribution not too long ago, and all of a sudden, boom, they had a whole new book. You have, GW will bring out a new faction out of once in a while. That's sort of an interesting thing because it doesn't necessarily, I mean, of course, some segment of the players are going to be like, a new army, I've got to build it myself. But a lot of us don't necessarily buy that new army. But it's still, I don't know about you guys, but it makes me excited because it's a new opponent to try out against. And and it's kind of funny, if you talk about the group dynamic, you're always excited to see the guy who just walked in with that new army because you get to try your classic army against that new challenge, right?
Yeah, when I see a new army come out, what goes in my... Well, first of all, unless the models really grab me, and we'll get to that in the next segment of this. If I'm not that interested in the models or anything, what I look at it is like, this is potential for new gamers because, I mean, this is going to appeal to a bunch of people that aren't playing the game already. So I'm like looking at it like, this is great because I'm hoping this will help actually expand my player base.
That's a good point. Well, Craig, what do you see when you see a new codex, when a new army list come out?
Well, I'm very excited. I'm a little nervous. My learning curve's not that great. I played my first game against the Russians, the SSU in Dust last night, and it's very exciting, intellectually challenging because if the game system is designed well, then there's going to be a whole raft of new challenges that you're going to have to deal with. So for me, it was guys with shorter range, but heavier firepower and helicopters coming swooping down, going 36 inches in one turn, and paratroopers and all kinds of cool stuff that I was dealing with. So when I see a new one come out, I'm mostly excited and a little bit nervous about like balance, but I think that's that has to do with residual effects from a different game company.
So that's always important, though, right? I mean, I think no matter how good a job a company does with a new army list, there's always a little bit of fear, right? With the new stuff's going to be broken or whatever.
Right. And to feed that fear, if you're not thinking critically, it's going to take you a while to meet those new challenges and figure out the new combinations that you're going to have to put together. And so the initial impulse for many people is like, oh, this is more powerful than mine because it's got different strengths and weaknesses and you have to adapt to those. And it's going to take a little while to figure out how to adapt to them. Right. Which is another exciting, that whole element of that, a living game that's constantly upgrading and updating and has new things, new challenges. If you are playing against the same army over and over and over again, then you might as well be playing one of those dead games that Ian loves.
Well, it does come back to the living thing. And I think, and I, Norbert, you made a great point earlier about attracting new players. I think one of the reasons I'm so excited to see the new, I'm really enjoying the Dust Warfare rule set. And I know, though, that while there's only two factions, this game will never get mainstream acceptance. Now that there's a third faction, I'm really excited about that. If the fourth faction does indeed turn out to be the aliens, that, again, will do more to bring the game in, not only because there'll be a fourth faction, but now you've got something that's completely outside of history and totally might bring in another whole play group who would not have otherwise looked at Dust Warfare, right? So that does allow you to feed the community, get more excited. If you look at Retribution, it was a totally different look. If you remember when the Tau came out for GW, that was a totally different look. Oh, there you go. Hello. A totally different look also for that game system. So a lot of times these new factions will also make a completely different look for the game to try to appeal to, those folks who like models and for some reason their current collections don't hit there. So that's always interesting.
I think that was the sound for the Krispy Kreme donuts being ready.
It might have been the hot side on. One thing you mentioned too, Norbert, was the community, right? So let's talk a little about how important is organized play. And I guess look at two sides of this, right? How important is organized play for us as gamers if it's organized by ourselves or our local group? And how important is supported organized play from the company itself to our commitment to a miniature game? Why don't you start, Norbert?
Okay. To me, being an organizer, I mean, one of the reasons I really became an organizer and volunteer for Privateer Press was because I wanted to make sure our store ran a number of regular tournaments, because I think those kind of like are events kind of like that are punctuated, that are a little more formal than casual gaming. And so it really kind of brings the community together. And, we started getting even bigger where we wanted to get other stores kind of involved into like cross store tournaments and things where, a little healthy competition, it always brings people together, to a degree. So to me, again, War Machine Hordes is designed for tournament play, so it's a perfect way to play the game. And because you're organizing these things, more people are involved, and I think they just feel like there's like an event that they can get around rather than just kind of showing up and playing just as if they were playing in their basement. So I think it's a really integral part of our community to organized play.
What do you think, Craig?
What do I think about what organized play and how important it is?
Yeah, welcome to the show.
I think. Sorry.
He's a sugar.
Hey, was I correct? I mean, welcome to the show. If I was incorrect,
Look, Norbert's the guy that's up at like 3 a.m. over there. What's your excuse there, big guy?
What's my excuse? This is my first day completely medication free.
Oh, nice! Congratulations.
Yeah, it's not going so well. Things are hurting that haven't been hurting in a long time. So, but yeah, so that's my excuse. Organized play. It's not for everybody, but I think it's essential to keep a community vibrant, alive, and growing. Right.
Well, you actually run your own flavor of organized play. So Norbert was talking more about the tournament scene, but also the other kind of organized play is the more less competitive, but more like a campaign system, right? Or maybe
that's very
some
true.
of the Armageddon stuff GW did, or the recently Privateer Press did, stuff like that. I think all that stuff to me kind of reinforces the idea that. Because I think when you look around and see lots of people playing your game, so even if you just go to a website and see all the people logging games, right, to count up for your favorite faction to win, it gets you excited about the hobby because you realize, look at people play this, play Signar or play Imperial Guard or whatever. I'm in a part of a big community. It's cool. So it gets you more pumped about the game, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, you know what, guys? Let's put it this way. If I was still in the States and had a regular game store, although even a game club here, and 90% of the people were playing one game that I didn't play already, there is a good chance that I'd probably switch to that game, unless I really, really hated it. Because the whole point for me is to be playing with other people. I want to socialize in that way. So, I'll suck it up and play something else just so that I can be part of the crowd and always have a game and go do things together as a group as a result. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Norbert. That was one of the things I wanted to mention or ask about, and I think you've nailed it, which is this idea that how important is the game group, right? And I think that's critical, right? If the region you're in is only playing one particular kind of game and you're a gamer, I think most of us would be willing to compromise whatever thing attracts us to game B more to play game A if that's the game that's being played, right?
Right.
Cool. Well, now how and this is sort of a recent thing, I guess, but I wanted to kind of touch on it too, is, well, I guess before we go there, how important is updated and evolving changing to the core rule sets to the game?
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean, I want to make sure the company is actually paying attention and fixing problems with it, but I don't want a ton of different additions coming out that radically change the game. Just because, unlike with Craig, it takes me a while to learn the new systems, and that is a bit of a nuisance. So the less of it that I have to do, the better, because I'm just trying to actually get good at what I know.
Right.
But, if there's a problem, or, with the game and the company's just not, been doing anything about it, that can get really frustrating. And it might seem like the company didn't care about the community. So that's important for me, that part of it.
And at the same time, I think that's a very fine line to walk, is what we used to call rules by committee, where like Spartan Games at the very beginning, you would have a bunch of people, and everybody knows on forums you've got the worst, the worst of the worst and the best of the best, but the worst are very vocal. So if you're going to constantly change your game based on, all of the complaints that you get online as a knee-jerk reaction, that makes me very nervous.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to see, like you say, I don't want to see new versions or even just new FAQs. An FAQ is essential and it's important, but you need to have somebody really good working on that FAQ so that it makes sense, and also so that it's addressing the important issues while at the same time leaving the basic game alone for the most part, right. Unless there's something that's really broken. Like the FAQs that came out for a lot of the 40K codexes with 6th edition. I haven't run into any serious problems, but that's probably because I play fast and loose. Like just last night, there was an issue where one of the Tau war gear pieces that makes one of their units basically be useful for no reason at all, that has it actually, what it does is differentiate one model from the rest of the squad, which is kind of what the whole 6th edition is all about.
Right.
They now have... They basically said, okay, this piece of war gear that allows you to do that and makes this one weapon loadout. It's the only thing that makes this weapon loadout of any use at all. Well, that piece of war gear doesn't do anything. It now has no ability whatsoever. So it's like, but okay, but why? It does.
Right.
It doesn't. If that one model had that one ability, it's not a huge difference. It doesn't make this big giant swing. So it's like, why did you do that? So somebody in there was like, let's just get rid of that because it's coffee break time or whatever. So FAQs need to. I think companies need to know that these FAQs are really important. Not only the speed with which they come out, but the thought process that goes into them, and the drawing the line where some things need to be changed or some things need to be clarified, but not because there's one guy out there who doesn't understand English doesn't mean every sentence needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's important too. I agree completely. The rules need to be up to date and listen to the community, but they can't be over modified because then it's going to be like, what rule set are we using today? Is it the one from last week's FAQ? Now, last one before we move on to what's pulling us away from our favorite games, like other games coming out. How much? It's just sort of interesting because I've noticed this happened a lot lately. It seems like game companies are all getting into this act, and I wanted to ask you guys, how important is new bling? Let me define this. It's things that aren't essentially directly essential to the game necessarily.
They're not essentially directly essential?
Exactly. They're not essentially directly essential.
Directly essential.
Right. But they're sort of aids. Like, for example, an army list creator, right? So do you need it? If is your game popular enough to have a good army list creator, or has the company created one for their game? Privateer's coming out. GW just came out with the digital versions of their books, and I got to be honest, I bought the Space Marine Codex out of interest, and it got me kind of excited again about Space Marines. And then, War Room's coming out. I'm really excited to see how Privateer Press is going to implement War Room. I want to try a game where I can mark the screen on my phone like it's a card. They're introducing, everybody's got crazy new templates. There's all kinds of supplements. Does that stuff get you excited about the game? Is it just does it keep you there, or is it more just that's neat, but doesn't really affect which game I'm going to play much, or how does it do anything?
Well, speaking for myself, I just bought for $18 the Imperial Guard las gun cartridge that comes with 10 dice and 6 little servo skulls to mark the objectives in a game that I probably won't be playing. So yes, bling, that kind of physical bling, the technological bling doesn't do it for me.
Right.
But I'm going to warn people here for the elite listeners of the Lost Chapters, and I'll mention it again when we do the big show. When we do game the achievements for the big show, but you want to make sure one of your friends buys that little set first, and you look at it because the tin that it's made out of is like 1 micron thicker than tinfoil.
Oh.
And the dice are the lightest, cheesiest resin dice I've ever felt in my life. It feels like I'm rolling cubes of plastic. And the 6 little servo skulls that look like they might be metal, look like they might be resin, are cheap plastic also.
Well, but it must have been affordable then.
$18,
no, it's not affordable.
So for $18, and I'm still happy. I've got it in my car. I play with the little cartridge. I'm like, I got a las gun cartridge, woo! And I'm okay with that. But
there's a lot of guardsmen in the Imperium, so that's probably authentic to how well constructed they are when they're distributed.
That's probably very true. And as every fan of 40K knows, in a pinch, if you need to recharge your las gun cartridge, you can throw it into a fire.
Right. So Norbert, how about you? Does that sort of ancillary stuff matter to you, or is it kind of like whatever?
I got to tell you, I do like getting those accessories. it's such a
what gamer does not?
I know. I looked at it's funny. I looked at the GW came out with it, and I want to pick it on GW because they're just the masters of it, really. Because look, I'm with Craig. I don't really play much 40K anymore, and I saw the servo skull tape measure, and I'm like, that's just obscene, and yet I want it. And then, of course, I'm in the store. I'm like, who would buy that tape measure? And, of course, Will pulls it out. Well, bam, here it is.
Of course,
and
Will does.
It's too big. You can't put it in your pocket. It doesn't fit in the side pocket of your bag. It's completely impractical. It's made of cheap plastic. It's going to break after about 10 uses, but it doesn't matter. You still want the damn thing. The only miss on that was remember when they introduced laser pointers in 5th edition because it was true line of sight? I think if that tape measure had been $10 more with a laser in the eye, that would have been the brilliant piece right there. I think every game would have bought that. But yeah, so I guess it makes us excited to see that our game's big enough to be supported with that kind of crazy nonsense. Really, let's be honest.
But I wouldn't switch systems because of the accessories.
No, I wouldn't either. But it kind of keeps us. It kind of keeps us excited about our system we're in.
Yeah, not only that, but it's an excellent way for a company to make more money off of one property without going and doing a whole new. Codex, a whole new version of the. You can milk us for quite a while on little odds and ends and blingy bits.
Right, exactly. So I mean, and I'm interested in the technology point of view too, and it's going to be interesting to see how that all works out. So we mentioned getting lured away. You wouldn't change a game system for the components, Norbert, or for this add-ons, Norbert. But let's start talking about what would lure us away from to a new game system. Now we've all mentioned already that if there was a big enough fan base already, that would be enough right there to probably make us go, that probably should be looked at because my whole player base is shifting to that game, and
that's the only reason I bought War Machine and Hordes.
There you go. Craig's a good example of that. But let's include that in our list here. So let's each of us pick one game to kind of talk about that's kind of getting us to look at it right now, and why we're looking at it, what gets us excited about it. And why might make us, if not jump to it exclusively, play it as an alternative or in addition to regularly our current game of choice. So Norbert, why don't you start? What's got your eye right now in the new game?
Okay, it's become pretty consistent, and it is what was driving it, and it is definitely the models, the look of the models. It started with Dystopian Wars. Mm-hmm. And because I saw oh my God, those new like land ship kind of things that came out.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man! I showed my wife the pictures, okay, and she is looking at me like, why are you showing?
Why do I care? And you're like, but look how cool! It's got little tracks. Look right
I've never done that before because I know she doesn't care about any of this and doesn't like it. And but I said, you have to look at this, and she still shrugged. But oh well. Right. So yeah, and I was also attracted to the idea that they were going to do land, sea, and air rules because that kind of went back to my historical days a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I like that kind of like a complete package of like I could play a land game or I could play maybe a mixed game. I never played like a mixed like amphibia game where you might have land elements and sea elements. But it didn't quite take because nobody was really playing it at all. And I did play one demo game of it and I didn't quite like the rules. Yeah. So that was that. But when I came here, I always kind of look for a little. When I go to a new shop, I always look to see what kind of stuff they're kind of trying to test out a little bit. And I noticed this game called Bushido sitting in the store in Wales. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking at it. It was just it's a little starter box, and I was like, "Oh, look at this!" And it's a weird kind of like Oriental type game, and that's kind of odd. That hasn't come out, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, I played it. It seemed real kind of fun," but that was the end of it. But anyway, I went to a game, a hobby show here called Salute, which is pretty famous.
Right.
And I walked by this booth and I said, "Oh, those are those models." And of course, they had a big display case there with their professionally painted models. And I'm looking at these models. I'm like, "Oh my God, look at these models!" And like, there was this one guy. He's this big demon, and instead of a weapon, what struck me is that they have. What I like about the Bushido line is that they have really kind of. There's like a lot of stock poses in our industry of kind of guys just standing there, wielding their weapon or looking menacing. These guys actually have quite a bit of different eye for the kind of poses and the kind of things that the models are holding. Mm-hmm. And so that was when I looked a little deeper. That's what got. The first thing was just the visual attraction of the colors and the shapes of the models. But then I'm looking at it and I said the poses and everything were just really different from what I've seen from the usual fare. Even between game systems have quite different models. These guys just pose differently. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking at this one demon kind of guy, and instead of like a normal weapon, he's got like one of those old Japanese bells, like those gong.
Oh, right.
Not a gong bell, like one of those. Like looks like a bucket, like an upside down bucket with the hammer inside of it.
Yeah.
And he's swinging that around on a big chain, and on the other side of the chain is one of those large old Japanese coins, kind of a thing.
Oh, nice.
And it blew my mind. I was just standing there staring at this stupid thing, and that never happens to me. That just does not happen to me. Because it does with the War Machine stuff, because I do like those models a lot. I mean, that's what got me. I should say that. That actually got me into the models in that game a little bit too. My friends were playing it, and then when I saw them, I really liked this like robots, these bizarre robots.
Right.
Because the War Machine robots, they kind of hunch over funny. Like I couldn't even kind of see where their heads were, because they're kind of like the shoulders and their back is like higher than their head. So it was just really kind of different from the way other models looked. And that's what happened with the Bushido stuff. I saw that. And naturally, they had the 10% sale or whatever they had off because it was a convention. So I went ahead and bought 2 starters, and that was the end of that.
So are you getting any traction locally with it? People like it?
Yeah, well then, so then you start looking around for people who might be interested in playing, and that's why I bought 2 starters, just so I could play with somebody else who might be interested. And it turns out, there's the local club, and even more interestingly, it turns out the guys it's just a bunch of guys. It's a startup essentially at this point. They just finished a Kickstarter that really did well for them. They're called GCT Studios, and they are in London. So I actually was able to meet with them, and they did some demos, like a demo night at the gaming club that I'm at. So it got quite a bit of traction. And it turns out there's a community of people that are actually playing it a little bit. Kind of again, it's like this low basal level activity going on. That was one of the games. So yeah, I did get a few games in it because of that.
Now you'd mentioned earlier that the rules have to appeal to you. Have you finding the Bushido rules to be to your liking?
So I'm trying to stay open-minded because, not everything has to be War Machine and Hordes. Right. At least I'm trying. I still like a tight rule set, though, to be honest.
Right.
So these guys were big confrontation players, which I never played. So people keep telling me they're like confrontation, the rules. And so, but they've kind of like tried to improve from where confrontation left off.
Right.
And so I do like them. They're quite a bit different. It's a different kind of game. Again, like before, I was mentioning how fantasy, Warhammer Fantasy, and War Machine, you have to look at them as, even though they use the same kind of, like, their miniature war games, they just offer you a different experience, different kind of taste. I'm trying to see, like, this game is offering me something different. So it's not going to be War Machine Hordes. It's going to be offering me something different. So looking at it from that perspective, it has been quite interesting. But I can already see it's not going to be my wife. It's going to be my mistress.
Okay, there you go.
So never mind. I was going to go all politically incorrect on you. Not unlike Bushido that opens their website with a Che Guevara quote. That's interesting.
Yeah, that is new. Wow.
But the models look, that's gross. That's just gross. The Nyan, what is a Nyan or Nyan? That's an awesome looking model in that it is disgusting.
Yeah, they run the gamut there. I'm curious, Craig. You're a modeling guy. That's big for you. What do you think of the ranges? Just if you had to say overall,
looking at the Bushido.
Yeah.
I actually found these guys a while ago and didn't know that's who you were talking about until right now. Because I was looking for a model that I could use for our Deadlands campaign for my character, and he's a martial artist, and I ended up looking, and I spent a good hour looking at these. The quality of the models looks really nice. It's not unlike War Machine. It is it has a very strong aesthetic behind it. I think. I think the finer details are a little rough, but that could be the paint jobs that I'm seeing. Okay. Like the facial expressions and things like that kind of harken back to maybe like 10 or even 20 years ago. The models that you would see where they're not really entirely the proportions are a little off, I think, but at the same time, there's some awesome imagination. Some stuff here reminds me of Malifaux as far as the ideas behind them go. So yeah, so it looks pretty darn cool. I love the monkey boy balancing on his little staff. What faction do you do?
The one that caught my eye initially was the demon one, which is the Savage Wave. But then almost immediately so I like them kind of like overall quite a bit. But what immediately caught my eye in that case at the same time was the Temple of Rokan's leader, which is the dude sitting in a yoga pose on top of a huge turtle. That guy is awesome. He's just so awesome.
Yeah, well, to be fair, the demon models look like probably because they're not human, so there's not that necessity. They look really cool. Oh, there's a gremlin. I spotted a gremlin.
Yeah, do you see those gremlins?
Yeah, there's an actual gremlin from right out of the movie.
Nice.
Yeah, but look at them. Cool. They have little coolie hats on. And they have all these kind of crazy faces.
Somebody went and fed them after midnight.
I was going to say, you can't paint them after midnight.
No, yeah.
So that's cool. That is a cool looking game, and it's interesting too because it's skirmish, right? So you're being attracted to another skirmish game from a skirmish game. That's interesting.
I don't think I'd be interested in a big fantasy.
So you want to stay in a certain venue, which makes sense to me. And I had the same thing, right? Because I still play War Machine. I also play Malifaux. It's a skirmish game too, and I like it too. It's just so different, in terms of rule set and mechanics and everything is really cool. Craig, what's a good example?
What's the model count for Bushido?
So the starter boxes come with like about 5 different models. And they have 4. Oh, I told Russ you'd love this. They came out with 4 factions straight away.
Nice.
Yeah.
And they adopted the War Machine model in terms of releasing models. So every 2 weeks they release another model for a different faction. So essentially, you're never, any faction is never far behind the others in terms of releases, new releases. And so I think they have like another 7 or so models out for each faction aside from the starter boxes. And like I mentioned, they just finished a Kickstarter about a month ago and got fully funded plus more to put out their 5th faction, which should be out by the end of the year. Yeah, they're doing really well. I feel really great for these guys. They're just like 4 guys, really nice guys doing this out of their own pockets and, really caring about the game for now. So it really reminded me also at the same time of the way Matt Wilson and the guys started up Privateer Press with just a few models and look what happened to them,
That's cool.
Very cool.
So, Craig, let's talk about something that's attracting you away from your current love, which, of course, right now is Dust Warfare, right? So we've sort of gotten involved with Dust Warfare. We love it. I'd say it's one of my mistresses. So what's the new hotness now that you and I have been resisting but starting to fail against?
See, that was a loaded question.
No, sort of.
Russ is a lot like a lawyer. You never ask a question you don't know the answer to. So the answer that Russ is waiting for is I'm going to resurrect AT-43. No, that's not true. Well, I mean, I think and Norbert, this is interesting because of what you said, actually, that you were at Salute. Over here, the impression that we have is that the entire event of Salute was overshadowed by one game that everybody was talking about. And that one game was Dropzone Commander.
Yeah, please explain it to me. I just don't get it.
Now, it actually having been to the show, was that the case? It everybody was talking about it?
And the UK is bonkers for this game, even though it's not even out yet and stuff like that. And I mean, the models are okay. They remind me of Spartan models, to be honest with you.
Well, they should. They're from one of the guys who used to work for Spartan.
Actually, he was the original sculptor.
There you go. So there you go.
And it's got a science fiction theme, but so does Firestorm Armada. So I'm not saying it's a bad game or it's horrible or anything. I just don't know what it is about this one that got people all blown up about it.
Right. Well, that's why it's sort of a round peg, square hole fit for this particular segment. Because as we talk about what is drawing us away from our first loves, this one didn't really.
Right. It didn't.
Right. But it did draw everybody else. I mean, our friend Will spent God only knows how much money getting decent-sized armies for all 4 factions. But they did start with 4 factions. And the rule book, so right off the bat, he could do demos and try to get the rest of us interested. Because locally what happened was, I think all of us saw the models, and the excitement was and could only be predicated upon those models because that is all that anybody had until this week.
Right.
So literally, it was those models that were seen at Salute, and then slowly every day on his Facebook page, he would show another another one of the models. And the models are cool. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But aesthetically, my problem was I couldn't find. There's 4 factions, and I felt very much like I did when I decided I had to jump into War Machine. Was that there were models in each faction that I liked, but not one faction that I really liked. So like I think, I mean, you can't argue. I don't think that the models are awesome and they're gorgeous and they're really cool looking. I mean but I also think that as you're looking at them, Norbert, and seeing Firestorm Armada, I'm looking at them and I'm kind of seeing 40K a little bit. I'm kind of seeing the Imperial Guard and the Space Marines and the Tau / Eldar and the Tyranids is what I'm kind of seeing a little bit of. But I mean that there's a lot of cross pollination, so I'm not saying that's not a damning statement by any stretch of the imagination. But that's all that anybody had. And awesome buildings. I mean, awesome looking buildings. And then all they had were the little fluff pieces that were being put out like, oh, you're not going to have a deployment zone. You're going to be zooming right in and you have to like zoom right in with your drop ships. And it's a really cool, I think, concept. And I've read one battle report since the book came out. And it was very intriguing. I really want to try this game now. I was not super excited about it, and that's why you didn't hear us talking about it on the podcast, because although the models looked good, models from Malifaux look good too. I mean, there's models from all kinds of games that look good, and there wasn't anything else for Russ and I to get excited about. And in fact, I think it was a group of like 2 bloggers and a podcaster, or 3 podcasters and a blogger or something. Some little group was invited in to play test the game, and all of the things that they wrote were, oh, the models are great. The game was interesting, and here are a couple weaknesses that we saw. We gave him a bunch of suggestions though, and we think he's going to go with those. And that was literally 2 weeks before the rule book was supposed to hit the streets. So it was like, well, that's not really a ringing endorsement on the rules if these guys who are brought in to fluff it up are then going, we made a bunch of suggestions and we think that he's going to, I mean, and who knows, that could just be them, that could be them, thinking they're all important or whatever, like we do here.
All right. But let me understand. Let me understand you better though, because I like the Bushido models so much that I just want to own them, because even if I just painted them up, I'd be happy because they were just so pretty. It would be nice to just have them painted up. Yeah. Even better that I actually wanted to, because we're miniature hobbyists, I wanted to push them around, and playing in a game and actually tell little stories, by playing a game with them essentially. Right. You're telling me, and so that's why I bought it. Okay. I was happy to buy it for that. So you're telling me that you like, I'm not following you. You like the models, but you needed to still know more about the rules, or like, tell me a little bit more about what it is that was still hesitant. If you like the models enough, wouldn't you want to just have them, or do you need more?
No, I would say the models fall under the War Machine category for me, which is I appreciate their quality aesthetically, but they are not my particularly chosen aesthetic. They're not. I don't like them. I see why everybody else likes them. I see that they're very well executed, but I'm looking at them going like, oh yeah. I mean, there are models within almost all 4 of the ranges that I think are awesome, and that I might want to pick up just so I can paint them. But there wasn't like, I was not blown away by 4 awesome factions that all looked really cool and they were all really different and I loved every one of them and I can't decide which one I want because they all look cool. I was very impressed with the quality of 4 factions that seemed a little derivative from basic sci-fi, not even like 40K, just from basic sci. I mean, you got like the Marines from Aliens are there, and different stuff like that. But they all look good. But I'm excited when I see the models, and then I want to know like what kind of, like when Malifaux first came out, everybody saw the models, and we had like 3 weeks before Gen Con to be all excited about the models. But there was also like, oh, they're going to use cards. It's going to be playing cards instead of dice. And so you kind of had an idea like, oh, they're going in all these weird different directions. And so you were intrigued. There was literally nothing was coming out about the rules.
I have a theory.
Okay, Russ, let's hear your theory.
Well, here's my theory, because I agree with you. I think one of the factions I really think is cool looking. I also think everybody's going to think that's the coolest looking one. Well, I'm actually a little. I really like the one with the ducted fans. Those are my favorite.
Yep, those would be the post-human.
Yes. And then the second choice would be the ones that look like the aliens dropships from Aliens. They're also cool looking. The other two I actively dislike. I don't like the ones that look like the little amoebas with cilia sticking out of them. Don't like those at all. I don't like those at all. And then the other one that has the bat wings. Some of the models I like, but some of them I don't.
That would be the Shaltari tribes.
So, but here's my theory.
Yeah.
When Uncharted Seas first came out, it was also super derivative. Okay.
Yes. Because, absolutely. To the point where I was making up my own fluff.
But
based on the originals.
But there was a niche, as they say over there across the pond, right, Norbert? There was a niche missing, and that is everybody loved Man of War, and we're all waiting for Man of War to come out again. And oh look, here's a fully supported brand new company, all excited about producing Man of War. And Firestorm Armada, what was that? Oh, that's Battlefleet Gothic back. Yes. Well, what is Dropzone Commander? It's the game everybody loves, but GW doesn't support anymore. Epic. Dropzone Commander is not Firestorm Armada. It is Epic.
Yeah.
But it's Epic with better models, executed better than anything GW's done recently at that scale.
They haven't done anything recently at that scale. So
all the rules have to be is as good as Epic. And now you have a supported game like Epic with 4 factions out of the box, all the different scales, and it's cool. So a couple new cool mechanics like drop zoning stuff, and that's why I think people are excited about it, because Epic is back, but by a different company. That's my theory.
So, but if I heard Craig right, I think what got him excited about this game was the peer factor.
Yeah,
I'm not excited about it.
No, but you're interested in trying it now, thanks to your peers.
I'm very interested in trying it now because now. I mean, on Daka Daka, there was a really long. I mean, it was a weird thread that had 50 pages of speculation because there wasn't any information. And then when the book came out, the thread temporarily went on. How do you put these? How do the armies go together? How do these units work? How does shooting work? And then there was a battle report, and it was really cool. And then somebody started a modeling blog, and that looked really cool. And then it kind of devolved into normal forum weird you didn't put a period at the end of your sentence kind of crap. But yeah, I am very excited to play the game. I can't wait for Will to get his
all 4 factions in the rulebook.
All 4 factions and the rulebook. I almost pulled the trigger on the rulebook the other day when I realized that I might as well just wait and get it locally from Myriad. Rather than buy it online because there was no savings, and I'm not really all that excited about it. But I want to like it because if I like it, I think this can be an awesome game for me. I think terrain-wise, I would love to make a whole table of terrain. Just like when Epic first started, I wanted to make a whole Epic table, and I want to do all kinds. I would argue with Russ only in that although the models for Epic are dated and haven't been upgraded in a decade, the rules for Epic are still extremely solid. I think Epic is one of the best rule sets for GW has going. So I think if that's the comparison, then beyond the pure excitement and the models that Norbert just noted, I think Dropzone Commander has an uphill battle to climb because you're not comparing, you're not competing against 40K, and the rules seem. What I've seen of the rules seem very 40K-ish in that you're rolling to hit, then you're rolling to damage. The other guy may or may not have a roll to try to offset your hits. I love blog posts where this is not a fistful of dice game. This is a serious game. The most amount of dice each model will throw is 10. I'm like, seriously? You got a unit, so that unit of 3, if they're throwing 10 dice each, that's 30 dice. That's pretty much a bucket full of dice as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so I think Russ is right that there's a lot of excitement there. But I also am kind of in tune with the Epic community, and they haven't been talking about it at all.
They won't care because they're entrenched.
Right. So then if the hardcore Epic fans aren't the ones who are excited because it's like Epic, then who is? Just
the people who want to play Epic but find that having to go to certain eBay auctions to find the right model for your no longer supported army.
True.
That's what you're looking at, right? I don't know. It's interesting to see. I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, the one thing that kills me is price, because that's why I got out of Flames of War.
Yeah.
And Flames of War has stopped me from getting in twice when I like a year and a half ago, and then again when I came back from New Zealand. I was hardcore. I'm going to redo it. I'm going to jump right back in. I love it. And all it took was me looking at 3 or 4 blisters of 2 resin models for a ridiculous amount of money. And I was like, yeah, can't do that. Never mind. And I would say that although the quality of the models is great, and across the board, every review that I've read says that they're great. Only tiny little bubbles, which you have to expect in resin every now and then.
You can throw them
anyway.
at a wall and they won't break. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. The cost is much more in line with Flames of War than it is with other comparable types of games. Right. So for me, I'm like, oh, now. So that's one thing we didn't talk about when you're talking about games, and that's the cost, where you've got to kind of like suck it up. So Dust, you can play awesome game of Dust for like $150.
Right.
Mm.
Right. For $250, you can get all kinds of options that you won't be using every game, but for $150, you can design a good army and then buy the pieces you need for like basically $150. For any Spartan game, you're going to be able to have a really fun game right out of the box with $50 or $60.
Right.
40K and fantasy and games like that, you're going to have to spend $300-$400 before you're playing a decent sized game. War Machine Hordes, you're going to be spending between $200, $300, maybe even $400 to spend, depending on what army that you've chosen to play. And I think that Dropzone Commander falls into that very valid category of full scale army cost, where you are going to be spending between $200 and $400 for a full sized Dropzone Commander army, which for me that seems very expensive for that scale. But the models look awesome, and we'll have to see how the rules go. And if that's what everybody's playing, I can get into that game. If the rules, like I said at the very beginning, if the rules don't get in the way of my having fun. Mm-hmm. With all the pieces in the way I think they should work in my head. And it remains to be seen fluff-wise. I haven't heard a lot about the fluff. I've heard little bits and pieces here and there that some I find intriguing, some I find like, but I think you have to read it all together to get an idea. So I don't know. I am cautiously optimistic. How's that?
Okay, how about this, guys? Real quick, though. Where has it gone wrong? In other words, it's leading up to all this, but then it's died. And maybe why, real quick.
Well, it hasn't died. I mean, it hasn't even... I mean,
No, sorry.
Have it yet.
What could stop this from actually happening? How does this mistress become a wife?
The rules being bad would skill it.
The rules not being stellar is what's going to relegate this to everybody's going to play it for 2 weeks or a month, and then it's going to be on to the next thing. Which I have to say, with our gaming group, is the vast, most probable outcome of this. No matter how good it is, unless it's like, oh my God, jaw-droppingly amazing, we're all going to be playing. We will all be playing a totally different game in 3 months' time.
Well, I can see it getting traction, I think, and I could see it having longevity if the rules are good.
But yeah,
I think if the rules are
but they have to be good. They can't
I'm wondering,
just be okay.
I'm wondering if they can even afford a Spartan stumble, right? So when Uncharted Seas came out, they sort of stumbled with it. I mean, I thought it was acceptable, but a lot of people didn't like the rules, and so they massaged them a lot. Yeah. They're a lot better now, and they're doing better. Like Dystopian was a much cleaner launch of the rules. I don't know if people will be as forgiving with this game as they were with Spartan. Maybe they will, because again, it's in that. I really think they've got a niche here that people like, right? So I think that they want that smaller scale sci-fi. And there isn't really one of those right now, right? And I think that's what they've really hit. So as long as they don't do a terrible job, they'll be okay. And I don't know if our group will stick with that or not. I think it's more likely to stick than 40K 6th edition is for the long term with our local group, I think.
Right.
But
also, we should say that I don't think, and I think Russ agrees with me, you can't judge a game's success or failure worldwide based on our group.
No, definitely not. I'm more interested, but I think the rules will make it because Norbert, I think if it gets traction in the UK, as you said, you try something if it would really got traction. But for you to really be interested, the rules have to be solid. And I always get into a game. like with Dust, I didn't buy a model for Dust until I bought the rule book. And then I was like running around the store going, you got to try this game. It's amazing based on the rules. And oh, by the way, the models are nice. So that was that's my approach is I come from more of the Norbert side where if the rules are awesome, because really there are lots of miniature war games out there with great models and average to poor rules, what's really the exception. And I think really what keeps, you can do one of two ways. You can have the best freaking models on the planet, which is GW's approach, or you can have really, really strong, tight rules, which is the privateer press approach. You can be somewhere in the middle with some amazing models and really unique rules, which is the Malifaux approach. But you got to find that spot. And I don't know that Dropzone is in one of those spots. But if their rules are above average and their models are as fantastic as they keep that model quality up, I think they're gonna have a good game there. But we'll see.
Right.
This just turned into a Dropzone Commander preview. But there you have it.
It's the coffee.
It is. So Norbert, thank you so much for joining us here in Dunks from across the pond and staying up so late with us here tonight. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. This was a stimulating conversation, actually, really interesting.
And
well, that's good, because if it wasn't, you'd be asleep by now.
And we look forward to having you on the main show here in just a couple short weeks.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Fantastic. Good.
Take care, Norbert.
See you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.